O gracious God, we remember before you today your servant and apostle James, first among the 12 to suffer martyrdom for the name of Jesus Christ. And we pray that you will pour out upon the leaders of your church that spirit of self-denying service by which alone they may have true authority among your people. Through Jesus Christ our Lord, who lives and reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen. Buen Camino. Buen Camino is the typical greeting that you hear on the Camino when you pass folks, especially amongst the older generations in Spain. The younger generation doesn't say it as often to the pilgrims as they walk by, but typically the older people do. When you first start out the Camino de Santiago, you get the shell of the pilgrim. This is the shell of the Camino. So this is the shell I got at the beginning of my journey in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, which is in the eastern side of the Pyrenees Mountains in the country of France. And this would be tied onto my pack, and that would identify for folks that I was a true pilgrim, that I wasn't just trying to get a cheap vacation somewhere, that I was actually walking. So it come in handy later, and I'll tell you about that when we get there. As I mentioned, I think previously when we were talking about pilgrimage in the beginning, I went there because I was a broken person, some things that happened in my ministry, betrayal by my assistant, and I was just done with ministry, and this really saved my ministry and saved me in many ways. So this is probably easily one of the top 3 or 4 things I've ever done in my life. When I retire, probably, I'm thinking about doing a walk from Iona to Lindisfarne, England. But other than that, we'll go back to the Camino and do it again. So I hope you'll enjoy it. I hope a lot of people got to see the way, so you have some kind of point of reference for it. So there'll be time to ask questions, and feel free to ask questions as we go through the slides. This is going to be a little bit different than the other ones in that was a little bit more academic in some ways. This will be more, this is what Father Kevin did on his summer vacation. So, El Camino de Santiago, the way of St. James. So the thing is that it was believed that St. James is buried there at Santiago, and that's why people make pilgrimage to Santiago. During the Middle Ages, it was the 3rd most popular place of pilgrimage. Jerusalem and Rome, and then Santiago. And so what you have here in this map is you see all these different ways from all these different places in Europe, and they all converge right here on Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. I guess it's right about there. And so then we walk from there all the way to Santiago. So it's about 500 miles, about 790 kilometers. I walked about 15 to 18 miles a day, sometimes longer, and we'll talk about that too. This portion is known as the Camino de Real Camino Francis. It's the way of St. Francis, or not really St. Francis, but the way of France, rather. And so you can see right here, there is Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. Basically, I flew in here, took a bus, took a train, and got to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, and it is on the eastern slope of the Pyrenees Mountains. So the first day, this is the total elevation of the whole 500 miles. This was my first day. I went from 590 feet up to 4,731 feet. I thought I was going to die. Usually there's an albergue, which is the rest stops or the places where you stay. There's usually one about every 5 to 6 miles, because you typically have a village every 5 to 6 miles. We got to Orison, this place right here, and I thought seriously about making that the end of my first day. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you how physically challenging it was. Easily the most physically challenged thing I've ever done. But I got over the Pyrenees Mountains and ended up in Roncesvalles, which is on the Spanish side of the Pyrenees Mountains. So went up the Pyrenees Mountains and down the Pyrenees Mountain in a day. And you maybe remember this scene from the movie where the officer tells him that he's going the wrong way. They go through that street there, and that's where we started our journey. This is up in the Pyrenees Mountains, and it was terribly cloudy and rainy and windy. Worst day possible. The conditions couldn't be worse. the day we started out. But that's the way it was. A week before we were there, 2 British hikers fell off the cliff and died because they got caught up in, and you can see from this, maybe the next slide, you can't see much visibility. This guy, I want to nominate him for sainthood. He just had a cup of coffee and had some snacks, and I can't remember how far in. It wasn't very far into the path, and we had already started. But he was there to kind of give us a boost and some refreshment. This is me standing on the marker that basically divides France from Spain up in the Pyrenees Mountains.
You didn't have to show your passport there.
No, I didn't. Nobody there to check it. And so you saw that sign probably in the movie as well, and that's in Roncesvalles. The first night you stay in Roncesvalles in Spain, and it's 790 more kilometers to Santiago. Many of the homes along the way, and this is in a town that was made famous by Hemingway. He talked about a town with blue shutters on their windows and stuff like that. Really beautiful town, but this is just somebody's backyard, and they have set up basically a place for you to get coffee con leche, which is basically hot milk and hot coffee mixed together. It's the drink of the Camino. You get up in the morning, you have coffee con leche. You stop in the middle of the morning, coffee con leche, and tostados and orange juice, basically. And here's an old wood fire grill. You can see where they make the toast, and there's the milk, and there's the coffee, and of course orange juice. And that's kind of a staple in the morning for walking the Camino. This is my friend Adam, and if you want to, once you get home, if you're not tired of this, you could Google Adam short, like not tall but short, Camino de Santiago. Okay, and if you do, it'll pull up about an hour-long video that he did, and he filmed on his journey, and he's interviewed me and asked me why I was walking the Camino. And one of the things that you need to know, because I went anonymously. I didn't want anybody to know I was a priest, because once they know you're a priest, they treat you all very different. And there were times along the way that I wish I would have told them I was a priest, so they would have treated me different. But for the most part, I didn't want them to know I was a priest, so I went incognito. But Adam is from England, and he's an explorer. He just finished doing a trip down the Nile on a canoe. I mean, he's crazy. But he went into a store in England to get his boots, and they told him these were boots that he didn't need to break in. And he had four blisters on one foot and 6 on the other. Some of these are just scenery pictures. Very different landscape all through Spain, just as you would imagine any country. That's Adam right there, and you can see he's wearing flip-flops. There's his boots right there, and that's his girlfriend Joanne, both from England. And I've stayed in contact with them. We're Facebook friends, and I keep begging them to come over here to the United States, and they talk about doing the Appalachian Trail. They've split up. They're no longer together. But now I'm going to point out some people in particular. This is Kim and her son Scott. I'm going out for brewing school next week out to California, UC Davis. And Scott was a junior in microbiology at UC Davis, and his mom is from Santa Rosa, which is in the Sonoma Valley. So we became friends. Anyhow, we're going to get together this Monday night. They're coming over to Davis, and we're going to be able to do a reunion. This is Maura, and this is her daughter Mary. So Scott and his mother were walking it together, and Maura and her daughter Mary were walking together. Mary and Maura, they're from Virginia, or they were at that time. Remember her. Remember Mary. Try to remember her. Remember all these people. These people are really important to me, and I'll tell you why later. Yeah, she did. She was. I swore she was crazy. She walked the whole thing in Crocs. I mean, these are some Basque musicians. That area is Basque country, and this is a percussion instrument that they're pounding on. It was incredible music. This was at one of the albergues we stayed at. This is my friend Nicole. She's a German policewoman that I met, and we walked the Camino together for a while. This is a typical albergue. You got double beds, so you'd check in. Basically, you couldn't check in until about 2 o'clock. And you kind of just go through a routine. You check in at 2 o'clock. Once you get checked in, you claim your bunk. And if you're old like me and had to get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, you always wanted to get early so you could get that bottom bunk. The one albergue I stayed in had actually triple bunks. Fortunately, I had a bottom bunk on that. But basically, you had the same routine. And basically, what you did is you came in, then you went and showered. After you showered, you changed into your cleaner clothes. There's no such thing as clean on the Camino. It's clean and cleaner. So you change into your cleaner clothes that you'd kind of just spend the rest of the afternoon and that evening in. The next thing after you took a shower, you'd wash the clothes you hiked in, let them dry. And then after you get done eating and partying or having a beer with somebody, you'd come back, and then what I would do is I'd change into my skivvies and into a t-shirt, and I'd sleep in those, so all I had to do in the morning was pull on my pants and put on my socks and boots, and I'd be off. And that routine, you just do that over and over and over again. So basically all you need is 2 pairs of pants, 2 pairs of underwear, and 2 t-shirts is all you need, and some socks. One of the bad things about the Camino is you're walking so much that sometimes you forget to stop and smell the roses. And so somebody had this sign on there. It says, "Look behind you." And this is what we call a fleca, or a sign. And these are different ways to say you're still on the right path. But this one said, "Look behind you." We turned around, and that's what was behind us, that view. It's just gorgeous, isn't it? This is tires that somebody did this on the hills, on this hillside. Took old automobile tires and made this map of the world. Now, this is the other purpose for this. When you get to Iraqi, there's a monastery there, and out of that tap they have wine on one side and water on the other. And the tradition is that a pilgrim takes their shell, and they use their shell to drink at Iraqi. I won't tell you whether I'm drinking water or wine. Now you can see I've changed from that baseball hat to this hat, and what this hat is it guarantees that no women want to pick me up. This is basically what that's another fleca. Maybe all you'll see is some yellow on a rock in the road like that. And you know, it's nice to make sure they have. Now somebody was telling me about they didn't know whether they could walk the Camino. This is Harry and Josephine, and they are from the Netherlands. And they, instead of wearing backpacks, what they did is they had like 2 little carts behind them, one each, and they put their packs on the carts, and they did the whole Camino walking with a cart, so they didn't have to carry the weight on their back. I would guess they're probably in their mid-70s. What's amazing about them is that they walked from their home in the Netherlands. By the time they got to where I started, they had already walked 1,700 miles. Oops. I walked a distance, and I got to the town, and there was no room in the inn. There was no places in the albergue, and the bar next to the albergue was renting mattresses for $1 or €1 a night. And so some of these people, this is an outdoor handball court, those were all gone. Fortunately, a lady from Houston, Texas, that didn't know me from squat, but somehow Maura has no shame at all. She asked her if I could have her air mattress. So that's where I slept that night. It was one of the most miserable nights I spent. Only one of 2 nights that I spent out sleeping outside. I knew Kim and Scott. Remember Kim and Scott from California that I'm seeing? Kim later told me when I caught up with her later in the trip, she said, if we'd known you better by then, we would have let you slip between us. You know, they had mattresses. They were sleeping out there, but no such luck. Another fleca. This is the way they decorate their homes with flora like this, and so a lot of these homes will have these wandering flowers all through there. There's Kim right there drinking some coffee, and once again, this is somebody out of their house. Just in the bottom, they've set up a little canteen where people can get a coffee con leche and a tostados. This is a passiflora, is what they call it, and maybe you all know that. But of course, here's the 3 nails, and then there's 5 petals here representing the 5 wounds of Christ, and then of course the crown of thorns. Now this is Andreas. This is me wearing my woman-proof hat. And it didn't work completely because there's Mona from the Netherlands. So Mona, we met. In fact, It was a strange meeting. I went into the bathroom to do my routine, to get, to take my shower, and so I could wash. And I'm sitting in the shower, and all of a sudden this woman's voice goes, "The water's not very warm today." And it was Mona next to me in the shower next to me. So it was just kind of like, you're not in Kansas anymore. So we became fast friends. This is Logroña, and what they're doing there is they're having a festival celebrating their Independence Day. And of course, these are puppets where there's people underneath these, and they're dancing and that type of thing. Best Spanish omelet I ever had was in this town. It was just, we've learned how to make them, and so we make them at home from time to time. But it's a dish that you got to at least have 6 or 7 people, and we're only 2 of us, so we wait till the kids come home or something like that, and then we make a Spanish omelet. Just a shepherd and his sheep along the way. Poppy field. This group of boys were from a college in Pennsylvania, and they were walking the Camino together, and they were sleeping outside, and they were singing for their food. They were going completely without support. And so what they would do is that this night that we saw them, they would get together and they'd have a concert in the city square, and then people would throw money, and give them donations, and that's what they would use for their food money, and then they'd sleep outside. This is Martin Sheen's handprint and footprint. This is in Bellalardo, I think it is, Bellalardo, but anyhow, this is from the movie. This is his handprint and his footprint. Once again, a fleca. Somebody has left their shoes in the middle of the path with gratis, free, so if you want them, take them. Some people have asked me, what was the thing that you really took away from the Camino more than anything? And in a word, it was kindness. Incredible kindness for one pilgrim to another, for the people in the villages towards the pilgrims, but especially the pilgrims one with another, sharing food, sharing whatever they needed to share. It was really a phenomenal experience. Another fleca. Like I said, some of these are just scenery. At the top of this hill was a labyrinth that somebody had made out of rocks. I presented this somewhere, and they asked me, well, did you walk the labyrinth? I said, no, I felt like I'd walked enough. And this is kind of just a cartoon that was on the side of a wall. Pilgrim walking, dreaming about sitting at home, sitting in his lounge chair, probably in his skivvies. This is bocadillo. This is just sandwiches. So you'd go in and at lunchtime, and you'd pay, €2 or €3 or whatever it is, and they'd have them layered like this, and you just take the one off the top and get something to drink with it, a cold beer, and that would be your lunch. This is Scott once again, and we're enjoying a beer, and that's his mom's wine. She works for Simi Wines or Clos de Bois. She works for Clos de Bois now there in the Sonoma Valley.
What were those sandwiches?
It's just like ham. It was like a ham. Yeah. The story I got to tell you about Scott. Scott was a bio major, microbiology major at University of California, Davis. And the way the Camino works is that, like I'd walk 15, 18 miles, but they would be a stretch of 5, then you'd take a break, and then you'd go another 5. And my MO was that I would always do the first 5 miles of the morning by myself. I mean, it was just, and people recognize that about me, and they just leave me alone that first 5 miles. And then when I get to the stop, I'd either catch up with people that left before me, or people that were left after me would catch up with me, and I could say to them, hey, you want to walk together? And we'd walk together. And if I didn't want to walk together, I needed some more spiritual reflection, more isolation, then what I would say is, I'll see you in the next place, and they would know that was code for leave me alone, I'm going to walk by myself. Well, Scott and I walked together, and we got into this incredible, remember, I was incognito. We got into this incredible conversation about how he didn't believe in God, that he believed in evolution and science and the whole bit, and all that kind of stuff. So I said, well, he said, I couldn't be a Christian because I believe in evolution. I said, well, I know a lot of Christians, including myself, that don't necessarily feel like you got to negate evolution just to be a Christian, that you can still believe in God and believe God, that's the way God created. So it just blew his mind that somebody would actually believe that. We had this phenomenal, but he just kept arguing against the existence of God. So, and I'll tell you a story about him a little bit later, but we had some really good chats. My best conversations were with the kids, just over and over again, hands down. This is in Burgos, so this is the entrance into the city, is in Burgos. And there's the cathedral, gorgeous cathedral. Once you get to Burgos, you're entering into what's called the Meseta. And if you think of Kansas or Nebraska, that's pretty much what it is, very flat. A lot of people, when they walk it, they'll take a bus from Burgos to Leon and skip the Meseta because they think it's boring. It was the best time for me. One of the people I walked with said that basically the Camino works like this. From Saint Jean Pied de Port to Burgos is the time when you detach and leave home behind. From Burgos to Leon during the Meseta is the time of purgation. From the Leon to Cruz de Ferro, which we'll talk about in a little bit, the place of the cross. Remember where they go to the place of the cross in the movie? From Leon to Cruz de Ferro is dying to self. And from Cruz de Ferro to Santiago is being born again. And so for me, the Meseta was a place of purgation. It was a place where God really worked on my heart. Now this is Jordan and his mother Barbara. We just saw Barbara and her husband here probably about 3 weeks ago. They live in Marble Falls. Well, at least Barbara does. Do you remember the little cute little girl with Mary, the ones with the Crocs? Well, she met Jordan. They fell in love, and I got to read one of the lessons at their Roman Catholic wedding last January. And so they're just delightful. He's at Notre Dame doing a master's at Notre Dame, and Barbara, like I said, is in Marble Falls. And her husband now, they went back and walked it. She's walked it with her husband now. Now, when I got to one of the albergues, I woke up in the morning, and people kind of take off at different times and the whole bit. And I was getting ready, and there was a young lady there, and we just chatted, and we just pleasantries, and asked her who she was, and her name was Anna, and she was from England, and we just chatted, and we said buen camino and went our separate ways. Well, we walked the 15, 20 miles, and we get to Castelleritz, and we check into an albergue there, and I get the bottom bunk. And she comes in a little bit later, and it turns out that she was there earlier than me, and she had the top bunk. And so we reacquainted in the whole bit. Well, a few minutes later, her boyfriend comes in, and his name is Remy, and he's from France. And Remy all of a sudden starts getting really irritated and looking at me and pointing at me and irritated and pointing at me. And well, the bottom line is he thinks that I'm shacking up with this girl. He wants to know why it is that I'm in the bunk below her and he's over on the other side of the room. And so she finally calms him down, and he leaves, and he leaves, and then he comes back in, and he goes, she's right. She's right. So I just figured she probably said, he's an old fat man. What would I want with him? So anyhow, once again he leaves again, and she comes in and says to me, she says, did he say anything to upset you? And I said, no, not really, just kind of mumbled a little bit. She said, well, he's really, really drunk. We got in here early, and he's been drinking since we got in here. He's drunk, and we're going to go out, and I'm going to get him something to eat. He'll be fine. So they left, and as soon as they did, I thought, I'm getting out of here. So I packed up my stuff. I put my boots over my shoulder and wore my flip-flops, and I said, I had some friends, the ones that I just showed you from Marble Falls. They have a little bit of money, so they were buying hotels quite often. And I knew they were in the town, so I thought, well, I'll just stay with them. I couldn't find him anywhere. So I went to the other albergue, completely filled up. So the only other option was to press on to the next place. Well, I ended up having to climb this huge hill. I got chased by 3 dogs. The bottom line is, this is where I slept that night, in this lean-to here. Now, it was incredible. I didn't sleep much, but along this ridge here are all these windmills, power-generating windmills, and they had reflector lights on them for the airplanes. Beautiful light show that night. But I didn't sleep. I didn't sleep a wink. So anyhow, there's another guy, you'll see him later, his name is Kees. And Kees is from the Netherlands as well, and he walked all the way from the Netherlands just like that couple did. And I met him a few days later, and he said, what happened to you? He said, one minute you were there, and the next minute you were gone. And I told him the whole story, and he just started laughing like crazy, just belly laughing. And I said, what's so funny? He said, well, she must have really got onto him, because all night we could hear him saying, I love you, Anna, I love you, Anna, I love you. so anyhow, these are irrigation canals through the Meseta. Just a statue of a pilgrim in one of the towns. Another Flecka. There's Kees from the Netherlands. This is a bodega where the wine, put the wine cellar. This is a deserted hermitage outside of a town, and it looks like it was in the process of being remodeled, but in 2012, the economy had just really gone to crap in Spain. And so a lot of these projects where they were, probably what they were doing is was refurbishing it to be an albergue at some point in time. But it's a beautiful inside. I thought if I ever went back to Spain and started my own albergue, this is the place I'd love to do it. This is Lyon. This is the cathedral in Lyon. Here's some more flowers. This is just a large bridge, but right here is a medieval jousting field, right here. They still have the barricade in the middle, you know, where the two of them. This is just this was a Korean albergue that was run by the Koreans, and it was just a very nice, pleasant place. Now this is an interesting thing here. There's this place that's really deserted, and this gentleman right here walked the Camino 3 years ago, and he decided his life calling was to serve pilgrims, known as peregrinos. That's what we call them, peregrinos, and to serve pilgrims. So he comes up here, and all he serves is organic fruit juice and organic food. But he stays up there, and that's all he does is serve, and is donation based. You can give him something if you want, and not give him anything if you don't want to. Most people obviously do. That's where he's living. He's in that lean-to. Now this woman is a special woman right here. It's amazing how God brought people into my life on this Camino. This woman is a therapist from England, and we walked together for 3 or 4 days, and I was able to unpack all my hurt and my pain, and it was just, her name's Edwina, but she went by Ed. Just a phenomenal lady, really just was a godsend at that time in my life. Now this woman here, she was dressing this metal scarecrow in clothes, and she was in the process, and she kept yelling at me and waving me over, and I couldn't figure out what she wanted because she didn't speak a lick of English. Well, it turned out that I was the only one tall enough to take this staff and lift it high enough to put it in the sculpture's hand. So this is in Astorga. A lot of this interior of Spanish cathedrals is this gold. I wonder where they got that from in the 1600s. This is Gaudi's Bishop's Palace, and it's now a museum, but this was also done by Gaudi, the architect Gaudi. So this is the Bishop's Palace. It's now a museum. And
That's where we get our word Gaudi from.
is it? Well, I'll tell you what. Do you know the story of him? Very simple man, very pious, went to Eucharist every day of his life, and he dressed very simply, dressed like a peasant, and one day he was out in the street and got ran over by a cart. And people just left him to die because they just thought he was a bum. And he died there in the streets. Wildflowers. This was a place that we stayed at. If you remember the movie, one of the traditions is that you bring a rock from home, and I brought a rock, and it represents your burdens that you carry, so you place it in your pack so it's extra weight. And you walk with it, and then right across from this place is a monastery, and you go, there's a compline service and a vesper service, and you go there and the monks bless the rocks that you're going to carry to Cristofero to lay at the cross. And so this is the albergue we stayed at. It's run by a confraternity of the Brits. Different nations confraternity of pilgrims from that country of England have pooled their money together, and they run this. We had tea at 3 o'clock. It was tea time, and we had, you know, that's just the entrance to it. Beautiful wood door. This is kind of what happens when you come into the albergue. Those are my boots, the biggest of all of them. You leave your poles there, you leave your boots there. Couple of things. One is it keeps the floors cleaner. The other thing is it helps with the smell during the night, because those get pretty rank. There's Cristofero in the distance. You can see the pillar. This is a Templar castle. It's in Pontferrad. Now there's Mary and Maura, okay? My good Roman Catholic friends, very, very pious. This is Matteo. He was from England or from Italy. This guy is just a great guy, Tony, and I've got a chance to get together with him a year after I walked. He's a Jesuit priest that was in Russia, and he was in Siberia for 3 years before he walked on the Camino. And he had just got transferred to Moscow and to become the provincial, which is basically the person that's over in charge of all the Jesuit missionaries in a certain territory. So there's only about 50 of them, but he is the supervisor of 50 Jesuit priests in what used to be the countries of the Soviet Union. And I asked him, how did you get the promotion? He said, well, first of all, the Jesuit system is you're only there for 6 years and then you rotate out. But he said they had gone into his predecessor's apartment and found him dead on the floor. He was visiting his mom. He's from right up around Denton. So he said, when you go back to Texas, you got to do me a favor. And I said, what's that? He said, you got to eat a chicken fried steak for me. This is just a beautiful little church, St. Francis Church, Franciscan Church in Osubrero, which is the last high point. There's like, on that first map, there's about 3 or 4 mountains, and this is the last one. Like you had a choice. We'd get up in the morning, we'd turn to each other over coffee and say, what do you want to do today? I think I'll walk. This is in Galicia, and it's very wet. This is the largest and oldest Benedictine monastery in Spain. And then this, right around this area, we just walked along the road, and it went along this stream the whole way down. So we heard this babbling brook, all the way down. It was just gorgeous. Now, this is when I got to Sarria, where I was going to meet my wife. My wife flew into Santiago, and then took a bus back, and we were going to meet in Sarria. I actually jumped the gun and went and saw her in Lugo, but that's another story. But anyhow, so she threatened me with an inch of my life. If I wasn't there when she got there, I was in deep caca. So I got there like 2 or 3 days before she arrived. So I got there, and I went to this bar. You call them a bar, it's where you eat, it's where you drink, it's where you do everything. Anyhow, I was there, and I asked the lady that was tending bar, is there any place I can stay other than an albergue that's inexpensive? And so she started talking to her boss, who doesn't speak a lick of English, and so she was talking back and forth, and all of a sudden he disappears, and next thing I know, he's out in the road honking his horn telling me to come out. And so he opens the front door for me and opens the back door for me to throw my backpack in, and I'm thinking, well, this is the last time anybody's going to see me. But he drives me down to a friend at the end of the road, and I get a hotel room with my own bed and shower, 15 euros a night. Oh, I mean, it was, so I frequented his establishment for every meal I possibly could. So when we got there, when Pamela got there, I wanted to introduce him to him, and so we took this picture with him. And we ate there our first meal, and so I had a tall beer there, and then Pamela likes red wine, so she got a bottle of red wine and 2 glasses there, so we started splitting that. And the next thing I know, he comes out with a bottle of white wine and says, here, I want to give this to you, and he gives that to us free. So it was a good thing that we could walk back to our hotel, but just gracious as could be. And there she is at Sarria, getting ready to start. Oops. They dry sausages and popcorn and meats and that stuff up there so the wind can get through that. It's bricks that are on end. But it keeps dry that way, but they can still, get air through there. And you'll see those all over. Now this is Francois. I met Francois on the first day when I got off the plane, got on the train to come to Saint Jean Pied de Port. Francois from Ottawa was on there. I saw him the first day. He walked that first 5 miles. Remember when I told you I just wanted to quit in Orison? He was the one that was really encouraging me. He could see how fat I was and how I was winded and how difficult things were going for me. And so he really was trying to encourage me not to go on, to stay there. But I just pressed on anyhow. Well, anyhow, I never saw him again until this day. So here I started, what is that? July 4th, okay? And I started out on June 3rd. So I saw him on June 3rd, and then I didn't see him again until July 4th. One of the Italian, Matteo's father, Massimino, he used to call it, he'd say chipon, which I think is Italian for mushroom. And that's the way pilgrims were. It's like an amoeba. You might walk with somebody for a while, but then after that, they may go further than you, or you may go further than them, and then you wouldn't see them for a while, and then all of a sudden they would pop up. And that's what Francois did. He came around the corner, and Pamela and I were just here at the table having a coffee con leche, and he goes, and I go, Francois! And he goes, Kevin! He says, I don't recognize you. He says, you've got a beard and you're fit. So,
Father, did you train at all before?
I walked a little bit before in the months of March and April, and then things got busy at church with graduation, all that stuff, and I had to peel back my exercise routine in May. So I wasn't in shape. It rained a lot in Galicia. This is one of my favorite shots. I don't know why. There's something about this picture that just...
Very serene.
Huh?
Very serene.
It is, isn't it? I just love it. I hated that my date stamp was on there, but... If I had to do it over again, I wouldn't do ponchos. I'd do weatherproof jacket and hat, and then have a backpack cover. Ponchos kind of got in the way a little bit. This is a communal wash house, and so I asked Pamela to pose on a picture like there, but the women would come out there and wash their clothes together. You can't see it, but this is cartas on here for letters, and this is pan for bread. So it's a mailbox bread box. This is the running of the bulls. No, this is just a farmer that was taking his cows from one field to the other. So that's one thing you find a lot in the Camino, especially in Galicia, is a lot of cow manure. You had to really be careful. These are our comparative feet. I've got a black toe, no blisters. Pamela's got 1, 2, 3, 4. I think she had one there, 5 blisters. I mean, she blistered up something fierce. I feel bad for her. But I was very fortunate in that regard. In July, it becomes like a holiday in July, and a lot of the kids start walking the Camino, and they do the same thing. They walk the last 100 kilometers. Because if you walk the last 100 kilometers, then you can turn your passport in for a certificate. This is you're a pilgrim, that you walk the Camino. So it's a very nationalistic thing to do, so a lot of kids do that and that kind of stuff. And so it was really not very serene. That's why Pamela really wants to go back and wants to do the 500 miles, because her experience was very different than mine. This is somebody that has a memorial along the way, and it basically is, it's a person who died peacefully in her sleep in Santiago de Compostela on June the 24th, 2003, having just completed her second consecutive Camino, and then she died. This was a memorial that was along the path. That's where we thought we had arrived in Santiago. It wasn't the case. Pamela didn't have the chance to do the Cruz de Ferro and lay the rock, but you can see that people had put crosses in the fence, and so that was kind of her way of doing what I did because she was pained by the experience as well and went through a lot as a result of that experience, and so this was her way of kind of laying it at the cross as well. A fleca on a manhole cover. This is a memorial that commemorates John Paul II's visit to Santiago. Now we're finally at the city limits. This is the line to exchange our passport. Well, I'll show you in a second here. We'll turn the lights on and I'll show you a few things. But we exchange our passport that we have for the certificate. And that's the certificate right there. The chapter of the Holy Apostolic Metropolitan Cathedral of St. James, custodian of the seal of St. James, altar to all faithful and pilgrims who come from everywhere over the world as an act of devotion, entering under vow or promise to the apostles' tomb or patron or protector of Spain, witnesses in the sight of all who read this document that Mr. Kevin Wittmeyer has visited devoutly this sacred church in a religious sense, witness whereof I hand this document over to him, authenticated by the seal of this sacred church given to St. James de Compostela on the 7th day of July, 2012. That's the cathedral. As you can see, the pilgrims mill around in front because every day, even while we stayed in Santiago probably for 2 or 3 days after we finished, we'd go down there every day just to see what pilgrims might be coming through that we had walked with. And that's the Boto Fumero, the incense, the big long incense that they swing. Now, I should tell you about that is they don't swing it all the time. They only do it on high feast days or if there's pilgrims that have enough money that they pay to get it done. But when we were there, the first day we got there, they swang it. And the Archbishop was there. And then 3 days later, we went back and they swang it again, and the President of Spain was there. Well, we found out later, if you remember in the way they're arguing when the Irishmen, when Martin Sheen gets mad at the Irishmen, he's quoting from the Codex Callisticus. It's the first original, there was a janitor that had stolen that a previous year, the year before we went, he had stolen those documents. He was a janitor there at the Santiago, electrician, I think. And he had stolen that codex and had it in his garage, and they recovered it. And they brought it back. They recovered it on, I think, 4th of July. And so on the 7th of July, the Archbishop came to bless it and all that. And then the President of Spain came back 3 days later. So we got to see the swinging of the incense at least twice. This is Hans and his wife, Erica. Hans and Erica are from Canada. Hans walked with me from the very beginning. Remember that beautiful picture where I said, look behind you? Hans is in that picture. His wife did the same thing Pamela did. She flew into Santiago and then walked back to Sarria and walked the rest of the way with him. That's inside the cathedral. This is Sam and Anna from England, and there's people that I met along the way as well. The interesting thing was that Anna and Sam split up a few days before they got to Santiago. We saw actually Sam came in first and then Anna came in later. Anna's grandmother had died while she was on the Camino, and she wanted to separate from Sam so she could have some time by herself and reflection, and continued the Camino, and then of course joined us in Santiago. This is Gary from Australia, and Elizabeth is one of the other young ladies from California that I got to know that we had some really good conversations about the meaning of life and what was important. She and I walked together in the Meseta and talked about death, just some really powerful conversations. When pilgrims, if they're not open, if they get there before 2 o'clock and the hostel or the albergue is not open, then they just line their packs. And this person, when they open, will be first, and they just fall in line, and that's what they'll do sometimes. This is at Finisterre. They went to Muxa. This is Finisterre, literally the end of the earth. It's the furthest western point of the continental Europe, hence the end of the earth, Finisterre. And the tradition is that when you get to Finisterre, at the end of the earth, then you burn your clothes. And I didn't burn them all. I don't think the world was ready for that. But I did burn my shirt because no one would ever want to wear that thing again. And I didn't have a match, so this is a young man that was there, and he helped me burn my clothes. So there. That's it.
Very interesting.
Can we get some lights?
And what about the boy you said you would tell us later?
The what?
That didn't believe in Scott.
Oh, yeah. So anyhow, Scott, we get to Finisterre. And once again, it was really serendipitous. Other than Maura and Mary, My wife got to meet almost everybody that was meaningful in my life that I walked with on the Camino. It was just phenomenal. But we didn't see Scott and Kim, and we were coming out of our hotel room at Finisterre, and who should be walking down the road but Scott and his mom, Kim. And so we just embraced and, and said, let's go out and have a beer and have something to eat and the whole bit. So we did, and so we sat down, and after Cristofero, my whole countenance changed. And after that, I started coming out and telling people that I was a priest. And so we sat down, and I said, I need to tell you guys something. And they said, what's that? And I said, well, I've told everybody else what I do. Because Scott asked me along the way, so what do you do? And I said, well, I had a bad situation at work, and I told people that I just needed to let that go behind, so I made a commitment not to share what I did. So he kind of quizzical looked at me like, what's going on? But anyhow, so I said to them, I said, well, I should tell you what I do. And I said, I'm an Episcopal priest. And immediately Scott hung his head and he said, I cannot believe I argued about the existence of God with an Episcopal priest. I said, no, Scott, I loved it. I just can't believe I did it. It turned out that Kim's father was a Methodist minister, and he had started out of seminary, got a small church, and had built it up and grown it up to an incredible size. And the stupidity sometimes of the church is amazing. But this is being taped, isn't it? They took his church away because they said he was too young to have a church that size. Even though he's the one that had grown it. So he left the church. And that family has never been in church again, including Kim. So anyhow, I said, Scott, no, don't worry about it, man. I love the conversation the whole bit. So anyhow, we bought him dinner, we bought him drinks, we had a great time. So anyhow, they said, if you're up in Sonoma Valley, come see us the whole bit. And we actually, after my daughter got married out in California to kind of declutter afterwards, we actually drove up there and stayed with her and her husband and saw Scott and the whole bit. But we got home about a week later, and all of a sudden we get this box, and it's got 4 bottles of singing wine in it. And it has a note in there, and it's got, on one side, it's got, Kim has written, you bought the last round, this round's on us, and and I want you to know that of all the people, I connected with you the most on the Camino. Then Scott on his side, he said, I just want you to know that, he said, of all the people on the Camino, I consider you to be my best friend. And it was just, and so, we just kind of knit our hearts together, so.
At what point on the trip did you feel closest to God?
Oh, I don't know that I could name and identify one particular place like I did with Israel. I mean, there was just so many opportunities and so many things that happened, different, aha moments that happened to me that it's hard to do. Let me just show you a couple things. This is my guidebook. This is all I had for a guidebook. Tells how many distance from one place to another, where there's hotels in the albergues. There's 3 types of albergues. There's the parochial albergue, which is the church albergues. They're the cheapest, probably €4 or €5 a night. And then you get municipal albergues, a little bit more expensive, a little bit nicer. And then you get the private albergues, which are the nicest of all, and about €10, so $20 for a night for lodging. And then what you do is you typically have a pilgrim's meal. And what that is they come out and they give you a choice of 1 of 4 appetizers, a choice of 1 of 4 entrees, and a choice of 1 of 4 desserts, and always a bottle of wine. And so that's kind of what you do for that. This is my passport. So every place that you go has its own unique stamp. If you remember Ramon, his stamp, I don't have Ramon's stamp here, but you get stamps on both sides, and this is what you turn in to get your certificate. If you indulge me, if you don't mind, I'll read you a day out of my journal. Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
It's a little revealing, but I think it's good to be vulnerable at times. This is from June the 12th. Mass was held in the cathedral instead of the chapel because there was a funeral last night. It was interesting to note that the funeral was incorporated into the already existing service. And at night, I went to Mass with Maura, who is my Roman Catholic friend from Virginia, and only her and her daughter Mary know that I'm a priest. She's deeply spiritual and incredibly intelligent. I actually thought about using her as a confessor on my journey, but our paths have separated and she still stayed in Colorado, and I continued on another 6 kilometers to Villa Vista. I did take a picture of Martin Sheen's foot and hand print before I left. I covered a good amount of territory today, 29K. I probably would have went another 6K, but it started to rain. The last few days have been challenging spiritually as I wrestle with my inner demons. There is no doubt in my mind that my thorn in the flesh is for me. There is no doubt in my mind what my thorn in the flesh is for me. Over the past 3 days, I've been told, I've been tested, but by the grace of God, I've been victorious. I know this won't be the end of it, as a continual thorn in the flesh like Paul's. The victory I experienced today is that more the thorn dug, the more by God's grace I stepped into who I truly am in Christ Jesus, and not the person this thorn would want me to be. I've also struggled with my vocation, and more specifically, my time at Trinity. The clearer I become about who I am, the clearer I become about what I think we are called to be as the church. Metaphorically, that came to me as I spent much of the day walking next to a highway. The contrast between the speed and the unconsciousness of the highway contrasted with the intentionality and the consciousness of the pilgrim's walk. I also had another wonderful conversation with 2 of the young peregrinos, David and Elizabeth. Elizabeth, who I met earlier and is searching, is very inquisitive about life. We entered into a conversation about death along the way. It was once again very rich. I love my conversations with younger kids. It is becoming apparent to me how irrelevant the church has become to most people. The question is not how do we find new techniques to appeal to them, but how do we form a community that is meaningful for their lives? So anyhow, that's kind of just a day in my journal, but it was kind of things like that, just different things that would come to me along the way. I know walking, when I was in Israel, there are so many things that made the Gospels come alive, but at walking, it was this sense of also this is the way Jesus traveled. And I could just, as I walked, I could imagine Jesus with his disciples saying, see the fields out there? See the tares in the middle of the wheat? And I could just see him unpacking the parables as he walked along with his disciples. And like I said, it was a phenomenal experience, one of the top 3 or 4 experiences in my life.
When on the pilgrimage did you realize you'd found what you went for?
Cruz de Ferro. In some ways, I felt like Cruz de Ferro. When I laid that at the cross, that rock, it really lifted. I mean, I can't. In fact, Mona from the Netherlands, one of the conversations we had, that she said she lives by no rules. She's very secular. And we saw her in Finisterre, and she and I and Pamela had drinks and dinner together, no bit. And so I told her what I did, and she said, I could see a difference in you between when you started and now. So she could see the difference that had transformed in me along the way.
What was the total miles that you walked?
500. So I did it in about 33 days, but I waited for Pamela, so I would be there in time. I probably pushed it a little bit faster than I should have, and by God's grace, I had no really major injuries, where some people had tendinitis and other things.
How much weight?
I lost about 40 pounds. So I gained, after we got done, Pamela loves red wine, so we went through Burgundy, France afterwards for her, for the week. And then I'm a Belgian beer fan, so we went to Belgium and went to Orval Monastery, Chimay Monastery, and Westveltren Monastery and had beer.
Would you wash your clothes every night?
Every night. That was the routine. You'd shower, you'd slip into your clean clothes, which I always kept the same clothes for that, for eating and that kind of stuff. So, and when I got to some albergues would actually have wash machines and that type of thing. And so when I got to those kinds of places, I'd do it. Other than that, you'd wash by hand. So that would be the first thing you do after you showered. You go in, wash your clothes, hang them up so they would dry, and use the fast, quick dry stuff.
Could you comment a little about safety, personal safety?
I-
I know he had
yeah.
backpack stolen, but
I think they've had some problems of late as it's got more popular, especially some of the women. So a lot of people are walking together more now. I never feared for my life, never feared for my people. The pilgrims are very respectful. I mean, I was smart when I went in to shower. I had a kind of a waterproof bag, and I'd stick my passport and my phone and, you know, things like that in there, and I'd take that in the stall with me, leave Mona out. And so, you know, I do that, but I never, you know, other than that, we'd go to dinner, we'd leave our packs there, and nobody would bother them. We hope to go back there sometime and be hospitateros. You can go back and get training to be a hospitatero, which is the people that wait on the pilgrims as they come through. So that's one of the things that we want to do, is we want to go over there and spend 2 weeks over there and just serve the pilgrims as they walk through. Can I close with the pilgrim's prayer?
Yes.
Then if people have further questions, I can stay around for a little bit and answer those. If you want to see any of these things, feel free to do that. Although I have traveled all the roads, crossed mountains and valleys from east to west, if I have not discovered the freedom to be myself, I have arrived nowhere. Although may I have shared all my possessions with people of other languages and cultures, made friends with pilgrims of 1,000 paths, or shared an albergue with saints and princes, if I'm not capable of forgiving my neighbor tomorrow, I have arrived nowhere. Although I may have carried my pack from beginning to end and waited for every pilgrim in need of encouragement, or given my bed to one who arrived later than I, given my bottle of water in exchange for nothing, if upon returning to my home and work I am not able to create brotherhood or to make happiness, peace, and unity, I have arrived nowhere. Although I may have had food and water each day and enjoyed a roof and shower every night, or may have had my injuries well attended, if I have not discovered in all that the love of God, I have arrived nowhere. Although I may have seen all the monuments and contemplated the best sunsets, although I may have learned a greeting in every language or tasted the clean water from every fountain, if I have not discovered what is the author of such much beauty and so much peace, I have arrived nowhere. If from today I do not continue walking on your path, searching and living according to what I have learned, and from today I do not see in every person, friend or foe, a companion on the Camino, if from today I cannot recognize God, the God of Jesus of Nazareth, as the one God of my life, I have arrived nowhere. Amen. Thank you all. I've really enjoyed being here the last 4 weeks.